Welcome, everyone, to the Globus Research Q2 webinar, Unlocking the Power of Usage Data. We'll go ahead and get started. Today's webinar will feature Carrie and Greg, who are two product and solution experts from Globus. I would like to thank both of them for presenting their expertise and best practices today. Here's the agenda for what will be covered today in the webinar. They're going to give you a quick overview of Globus, discussing how to make the invoice-to-cash process customer-centric. Then there will be some industry insight on what they're hearing right now about usage data and monitoring. Then they're going to discuss the top 5 use cases, as well as what the top 3 benefits are that are driving the business case. Then we're going to hear about and see a product example, specifically the Globus Usage Analyst. We will discuss 3 examples of success after that, and then we'll have some time to take a few questions if you have any. Just put them into the text box at any point during the presentation, and I'll collect them for the subject matter experts. During the Q&A time, I will post Greg and Carrie's contact information, just in case anyone has a deeper question or a discussion topic that you want to take offline. So let's jump in and get started with Carrie.
Great, thanks Brian, and thanks to everyone again for joining. So before we jump into the topic of the day, I just wanted to provide a quick introduction to Globus for those who may not be familiar. So Globus was actually founded back in 2008, and really from the very beginning, we've been focused on solving the problem of fragmented billing and accounting processes. So one of our strongholds is our patented technology around customer-defined analytics. And this really allows end users to define how they want to view, analyze, report on, etc., all of their invoice and usage data. So for a lot of our existing clients, this has really helped to redefine the customer invoicing experience. We have a strong client base from all over the world, who in turn have brought millions of active users onto our solutions. The majority of these actually have a few segment-specific offerings, so we have a wide range of users from SMBs and mid-market, all the way up to large enterprise and wholesale as well. And really this active and engaged client and also end user base, combined with our years of expertise from our team, is really what allows Globus to ensure both short-term and long-term success for our clients. So hopping into kind of what Globus is all about, regardless of where we are in the world, or even which industry we're talking to, there's really two themes that repeatedly rise to the top when we're talking about invoicing. And this really is around trust and efficiency. So both of these have a major impact on the customer relationship and in turn, internal processes. And while top of mind, they're not necessarily the easiest to fix. So the challenge is how the invoicing and the usage data exists today. So typically it's in a variety of systems, formats, portals, etc., really making it a less than ideal experience for the customers. It's hard to get a comprehensive view to validate if things are accurate, which means that customers, or a lot of times the internal teams on the customer's behalf, are actually spending a lot of time doing manual rekeying and consolidation. So the key is really automating this process for the customer and for the suppliers by making it a customer-centric experience. So Globus actually does this by unifying the invoices across all of the customer's different orders and accounts, and then we extract all of the data from each invoice. We give the customers a simple to use but pretty powerful tool to review, approve, and pay, all through a virtual invoice that they actually define themselves. And then finally, we also orchestrate the settlement across the different accounting systems for the suppliers. So it's really an end-to-end solution. Now the goal is to make the invoicing experience sticky by making it personalized to the individual customer. We also try to make it more efficient by automating as much as possible. And we also look at increasing agility by really allowing suppliers to quickly add or delete different products into the infrastructure based on things how are evolving or changing. And lastly, we try to optimize the invoicing by giving the suppliers the insights into exactly what's happening with their invoice to cash process. So again, the same way that the customers now have a consolidated view across all of their accounts and services, this also enables the suppliers to actually have a consolidated view across their entire invoice to cash process. So the question is, what about the usage data that occurs prior to the invoicing process? And so the customer-centric invoicing, it improves the visibility, making it easier and faster to review and submit payments. But for customers with usage-based products and services, that monthly reactive view may not be sufficient. So as we go into the usage and data monitoring and some of the things that we're hearing from the field, for many, access to real-time usage has become table stakes on the consumer side. So we're all used to being able to see, last or up to the minute information on our data usage from our mobile carrier, for example. In the energy space, we can quickly see our consumption from our utility providers. We can actually measure our car performance now based on, real-time usage. And honestly, we can even get, medical advice from our wearables. So it's really evolved on the consumer front. It's become the norm to really get what you need when you need it. But in talking with business customers and their suppliers, that need and that growing expectation is also prevalent on the business front. So in some recent surveys that we've done, we've asked end users to rate the importance of varying components in a digital invoicing solution. And actually we found that over 80% responded that access to pre-billed usage data is super important to them. We've also seen a spike in this request in B2B RFPs, and with very specific business requirements around how the usage data is made available, presented, delivered, etc. So circling back to the consumer experience, a lot of companies, and we've all seen this, have done a really good job at making usage data super accessible and almost mindless to monitor. So visualizations show an immediate view of consumption, text alerts are automatically sent based on certain thresholds, and per service information is really easy to review online. So fortunately, this has triggered a push for improvement on the B2B front, but unfortunately, it's way more complex to manage on the business side. So if we take a mobile carrier, for an example, who has thousands of customers who in turn have hundreds or thousands of employees with devices, although it's fairly simple to assume that a consumer with, let's say, a 6 GB plan would want to be alerted at 75% of that threshold, it's really impossible for the carrier to determine what's important for each business customer across every one of their devices and across every service type. So while some usage data has been made available for some products or services, more times than not, what we're finding is it's really not that valuable to the business customer. Without a way to easily connect the dots and then automatically extract what actually matters to that specific business, the time it takes to manage ends up actually killing any potential value of the analysis. So the question is, what do business customers really want out of usage data? So Globus research actually shows there's 5 main drivers for usage data and monitoring. And as opposed to the monthly invoicing, which is really driven by accounting processes alone, these are actually tied to a variety of business objectives. So the first 2 are probably the most obvious, especially in the telco space, but the rise of mobile workforce has really brought the usage compliance to the forefront. Companies want the ability to proactively monitor for out of compliance usage, which then obviously is typically tied to unexpected cost on the invoice. This can also be helpful as new services are added. So oftentimes, businesses as well as their suppliers are kind of guesstimating at the uptake or consumption patterns. So being able to actually monitor that and see how they're actually being consumed prior to month's end can be a huge help. And then of course, cost is something that's top of mind. The key here is really helping customers to avoid invoice shock. So by providing them with a way to monitor usage based on anticipated cost, it allows them to avoid, again, that invoice shock and being able to know what's expected to be on that invoice. Oftentimes, for example, there's repeat offenders or specific service types that tend to go over. So knowing what they've done, let's say in the past 24 hours or in the past week versus, again, waiting till month's end can have a significant impact on the business cost. So for services such as toll-free numbers, call center services, customers really want a way to track activity to ensure that resources are aligned accordingly. So if there's a spike in one specific area, for example, having the ability to reallocate to another area could actually help avoid, unanswered calls or lag times, which could have an impact on the customer experience. Another area that ties into the sales and marketing realm is actually tracking business activity against sales efforts and campaigns. So for example, one of the things that we've heard is actually being able to see that, let's say 40% of the calls are coming from a specific location helps to determine the effectiveness of one effort versus another. Same thing with, again, tracking of wait times or call durations, all have a part in being able to measure the level of experience that's being provided. And then the last one, spend justification. This one actually often goes unnoticed, but it's definitely important. So oftentimes it's not really about the customers finding the ahas or the gotchas to reduce the invoice cost, but just having the visibility and an efficient way to monitor the usage, especially when they have hundreds or thousands of employees. So this allows them to ensure with confidence that they can minimize risk. And really it opens the opportunity to increase the number of services with their supplier. So as we get into the demo, Greg will actually show some specific learn examples that are aligned to these use cases to show how they're kind of built out and make this possible. So from a supplier's perspective, there's really three key benefits that are driving the interest and investment in providing business customers with usage data and monitoring. The first is really about building stronger, more valuable customer relationships. So if we refer back to the use cases that we just walked through, usage provides an opportunity to engage more frequently and oftentimes actually allows you to engage with the different groups within the organization as well, and based on what's important to each customer. So again, while the monthly invoicing process is typically geared either towards the accounting side of the house or sometimes, for example, a telco manager, tying back to those business objectives allows visibility for additional people within the organization, and again, more business value as well. So in turn, again, this creates a level of business value that doesn't really exist with the products or services alone. So similar to the virtual invoice that we talked about on the invoicing side, customers really become dependent on this solution and then ultimately, the supplier as well. And then lastly, I just wanted to point out, some suppliers have actually leveraged this as a way to generate incremental revenue. So again, the business value elevates the value proposition. So it's not just a way to view usage data, but it's a way to efficiently monitor and optimize their business, which becomes, again, a huge value to the business customers. So I wanted to just quickly do a quick overview of the Globus solution before we hop into the demo. So similar to the virtual invoice process, the usage analyst can ingest data from a variety of sources into a single interface, which is actually also integrated with the invoice component. So it's one single integrated experience. It takes that data and then it makes it available in a variety of views and formats, as well as time frames, such as last 24 hours, last week, etc. So it really allows the customer to see the data when and how they prefer to see it. But the real power of Usage Analyst is in the setup and monitoring of the user-defined alerts. So users can leverage all data aspects to define exactly what they want to monitor for who or where and how often. And it automates the process tied to all of the use cases that we just discussed. So once an alert is triggered, the user receives a notification email similar to the example on this slide, prompting immediate action and review. So again, it automates this process of monitoring and then triggering the communications to allow them to then take action on that versus waiting until month's end. So as Greg walks through the demo, he's going to point out some of these, but I just wanted to highlight a few of the highlights that are in the latest release. So we've made quite a few enhancements that are really aimed at making it easier for the user to target specific alerts. So the first one are some new scope options. So this is really based on some end user feedback that now allow the user to set either a super narrow or a super broad scope. So this allows companies to align specific compliance policies, for example, to specific roles or departments, as well as you can hone on to specific accounts or services that may require more frequent tracking. We've also added some new date range options for the alerts. So now users can monitor against broader time periods, such as the current bill cycle, or they can, again, narrow it down to the specific hour. And then lastly, just wanted to point out, we've done some further integration with the usage component into the user interface. So those that are familiar with the invoice component, previously a user would toggle between the billed and unbilled areas. But now it's actually just a simple click between the tabs within the reporting pages, and everything else is integrated within that single interface. So with that, I am going to pass it over to Greg for a quick demo of the solution, and he, again, will go through some of these recent enhancements that we can see.
Okay, howdy. My name is Greg Velazza. I've been at Globus since the beginning. Hopefully you can now see my screen, which is the homepage of the Globus application. I've been involved here in design and product management since Globus was founded. I'd say I've got the best job here at Globus because I get to work directly with customers and translate product feature requests with the development team to make those real-life functionality, which is a great job to have. The usage analyst module has been a part of the Globus application for probably a good 10 years. And in that time, we've really heard a lot of requests and pain points around the usage analyst module. And those 3 points that Carrie mentioned on the last slide really were a direct response to feedback we've gotten through the years. That first one with the notification when any service or account goes over a threshold has been the biggest request from our customers, because that is how customers can identify where there's a problem. Before, we had that level of notification only at the organization level. Second biggest thing was around that date option, which is customers complained about getting too many emails. And we've addressed that spam type issue in 4 separate ways, which I'll go over. And the third thing that Carrie mentioned is the integration of the usage analyst module. We really wanted to get those 2 pieces, the usage data and the invoice data, together in one place where people could look at that data side by side. And in the past, we had a great solution, but it did require switching products, and it was a little clumsy for today's expectations of user interface design. So we're very excited to address these 3 pain points and many others, which I'll talk about. So diving into the demo then, we are looking at a real-life build of Globus version 3.5. This is hot off the presses. It's an actual code-complete build, not a click-through. What we're seeing here, just to get everybody on the same page, this tele branding is a generic telecom branding, and what this is representing is the end customer view of their invoice and usage data. So we're kind of going into this as the accounts payable manager or the telecom manager responsible for getting the bills validated and making sure that services are being utilized to the best possible. And then lastly, the size of this company, just give some references that this is kind of a mid-sized company with maybe 28 accounts, a little over 300 services. So that's the type of view we're looking at, although the product will support anywhere between 1 and thousands of accounts as well. So diving in here, we're looking at the home page, and I'm going to show I'm going to start this experience around the idea of what you can get out of the box without doing any kind of setup of alerts or notifications. It's a little bit of an inverse as to how you would experience this product after you have set it up for a couple months and it's running on autopilot for you. But just to start off here with this dashboard page, what you'll see here is there's a number of modules, and if you're familiar with the Globus application, that's not a surprise. But what's nice about this dashboard view with usage data and build data, you can see these types of data on the same view and the same page, and we can set these data modules up to reflect both build and unbilled data in one comprehensive view. So we see this monthly spend, which is build data, and we can see the data usage, which is unbilled data. As you can see with this our navigation, invoicing and reporting and unbilled is all integrated now into one application. These controls allow you to filter your invoice list, which is part of the normal bill validation workflow. But I'm going to dive into the report section, which will show off the unbilled data, which is what we're here to look at today. So this is a very exciting thing for me to get into the product, because many customers are frustrated with the need to switch product views to get to that usage data. So what we've done is made it very clear to the user that they're looking at their reports that are related to build data, which is kind of the bread and butter of the build validation process, versus the unbilled data tab, which is more of the real-time experience that you can check in every day if you'd like. So what's nice about this experience as a new user just jumping into the application is the carrier can provide any number of reports out of the box that reflect the best reports for their customer base. And these reports can be tailored to different customer business segments. So enterprise customers could have different reports available to them out of the box versus a small, medium business customer. The reports you see here, there's one report type here called unbilled usage, which is the report feed we have for the unbilled data coming in here. But we can support multiple report types of unbilled feeds in this view, which is great. So I'm going to dive into a couple reports. The reporting you'll see here is the same power and flexibility you'll see in the Globus build application. It's just utilizing all that power to look at the usage data. So diving into a couple reports here, I'm going to start with this international data usage report. This is a common report for sales staffs that tend to travel around the world. And sometimes when SIMs aren't put in, they can incur huge overages that are great to find out before the bill is actually cut. So what you'll see here is a summary report that's grouped by the service owner. That's the name of the person who owns the device, and the type of usage, and then the country they're currently in. This is grouped by 3 groups, which is a nice view. What I can do from here is drill down into any line item and get at the detailed records in case further investigation is necessary. I can look at all this data. I can expand this to a full screen mode if there's a lot of columns. And one thing that's interesting to point out about unbilled data, the product is very agnostic about the data that comes in. So most of our customers with pre-billed data have unrated data coming to the system, but some of our customers do have preliminary rated data is what you see here. So the system does not care what the data looks like. It's flexible in that regard, but most customers do just have unrated data at this point. So I'm going to return back here. I'm going to jump into another section, which is the alert creation. And that section is a little more interesting to what we're going to talk about today. Okay. So just to kind of complete that discussion about reports, reports can be ordered such that you don't have to log into the application. You can have reports delivered to your inbox proactively. You can pivot reports by up to 4 groups. You can really create any reports you want in the application, and you can use from whatever product reports that the carrier has set up for you. But the real flow and power of Usage Analyst is around the idea that you want the application working for you while you're sleeping, while you're having dinner. You want the reporting application to be looking through the data and proactively notifying you if something's happening so you don't have to log in and check on that. And that's what this new alert functionality does. So I'm going to create a new alert here. And you can choose between any report types you want that are in the system. You can use existing alerts as a copy because the carrier can supply any alerts that are out of the box that are nice to start out with. So here I'm going to add an alert. It's going to be about high inbound call volumes, and this is going to be tracking business activity. So I'm just going to type my alert criterion here. Let's see, inbound call volumes. Okay, so the alert is basically, this is the template for the alert, and we have these various sections that make this alert work. So the primary trigger is really what drives the alert, and I'm going to go here with the number of calls is greater than 200. So the nice thing about this is that for different companies, the definition of high could be anything you want it to be, because high would mean something different from a small company to a large company, from a small data center to a big data center. So here I'm going to keep the last hour evaluation period of time. So this is going to see if any calls over 200 in 1 hour. Notify me if that's over. And one of the things that we learned when we looked into the spam and the notification issues where people were getting to emails is that it was around these rolling periods, which is something that for an hour or a day, the rolling period really works great because it's like what you want to monitor, the last hour, the last hour, the last hour of the day. But when you talk about the last month, I'm going to just kind of illustrate what all these things mean here, because the last month could create situations that would continually be alerting you every day in a situation that would not make sense. So I just wanted to talk about that for a second because I think that's very powerful to see. So the rolling month alert is what we've had in the product for many years. And basically, the evaluation period as time goes on through the calendar is looking at the last 30 days. So it's a rolling 30 days. And the problem we found for many customers who use this is that those alerts were triggering repeatedly because the threshold was being met, and just moving forward a day would mean that the bulk of the activity would still be in the range that people were evaluating, and then they'd be alerted every day, which is not at all what customers wanted. So what we added to this is a bill cycle alert, and this is what the majority of the use cases we examined make a lot more sense. So when you get your bill, as you'd expect, we start the count, the unbilled data loads into the system, and when it hits that threshold, sometime in the middle of the month potentially, then the alert goes out, email goes out, and the customer can come in and see what happened. So this is a lot more powerful than the rolling, although the rolling does have value for an hourly or a daily type of situation. Lastly, we have another type of alert. It works very much like the billed alert, but that does an evaluation based on the start of the calendar month, which also has value to our customers based on our interviews. So I just kind of wanted to dive into that because that is a big change that has really made alerts extremely powerful in a way that was not available before. So another thing here, the second biggest request was this ability to target any account or service that goes over a threshold. So that's really what people want to see, is if a circuit goes over or an account in my entire organization goes over, because that's what you're looking for. Versus in the old days, our alerts basically would just tell you at the organization aggregation level. So that was not what people were wanting. So there's a lot of power here, and I will talk about this a little further in a second. But we're going to keep this at the entire organization level for now. And you can add filter criteria to really fine-tune those. And one of the things that's very powerful here is you can choose not to be emailed. So you can just see these notifications in an event log in the product, or you can have emails sent to you at a period of time of you choosing. So you might set up an hourly alert like we did here, but we can now choose the period of time of day, and then we would get a digest that would break that down, which I'll show in a second. So that's an example of one alert. I just want to show another alert scenario, which is, this would be one around tracking a specific problem employee. And this is a true story from our company, where one employee of ours did not ever replace their SIMs when they go out of town, and it created large uncontrollable bills. And I would call this Mark Smith. And for this one, we'll go total volume is greater than, so I did some math here. The comparison value is based on the report types unit of measure. So I'm going to make the assumption here this is a megabyte. We could look at the data to find out what that is. But so I'm going to say, basically they have a 5 gigabyte plan. That's their normal usage. But I'm going to divide that by 30, and that comes to about 166 megabytes. And then we're going to evaluate this in the last day. So about an average of 166 megabytes per day. And then what's powerful about this as well is we have a new control that lets you specify a specific service. So here, I know that Mark's phone number is 206-605-004. So I can now do it does a partial complete and finds the service. I can set up a specific filter so that this is only going to target when he's out of town, and that's going to be call and usage category contains the word overseas, so that this entry doesn't have to match exactly the terminology. And then I'm going to be emailed, since I really care about this, I'm going to be emailed once every day just to check in on that, and then I can save this. So now this alert is available. It is going to be working every day, and it's going to be notifying me by email to let me know when that situation is arisen. And I'm just going to do one more alert here to show something else. And this is going to be around, let's going to call it marketing, marketing focus here. Okay. So I'm going to do, we're going to assume that basically we have people on a 5 gigabyte plan, and I'm going to do a total volume is greater than 5,000 megabytes, which is the 5 gigabyte. And this evaluation period is going to be current bill cycle. And I'm going to target a specific node. And that node, I just type this in, marketing should return. Let me do this. Okay. So this is basically going to find, okay, let's see, for any service within my marketing. Let me just do this real quick. Okay, so this is basically going to return any person in the marketing department that goes over their 5 gigabyte plan, and it will email me every day. Okay, so that's some examples of alert creation. And what's great about that is that we have this flexibility now to really dial in those alerts based on evaluation time period and the scope, which are the number 1 and 2 things that people are looking to be notified upon. Okay, so returning to this list, this is the alert list page. We can see that the last trigger dates, the last alerts. What we've added as well is this event log, and the event log allows us to see all of the alerts that have been triggered in the last period of time that we can specify here. And what's cool about this is that alerts before, when you'd be notified by email, they would create a situation where it was hard to diagnose whether those alerts were being activated properly if you're just getting a ton of email and kind of overloaded with that. And now you can definitely see these within the application all in one spot. You don't have to have email turned on at all. You can just use this page for notification, which is nice. You can also filter this list by specific alerts. So you can see just the alert that you want to see all the events for it. Okay. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about the emails that you receive, and let's see if I can find that. Okay. So Carrie had this in her slide deck. What's really nice about these emails is that we've tried to address a couple things here from customer feedback. The first thing is that we now put the specific alert name right into the subject. So when the customer creates their own alerts, they can code that name with anything they want, and then they can use their Outlook inbox rules to target that into a specific folder or do certain actions based on that. So you can see services over 10,000 kilobytes per hour is the subject. It's right in the subject line. And then just to kind of talk about this for a second, what this does is it's a digest. So this is basically, you can see hourly alerts. And basically any time that the trigger was, or the threshold was met, we'll create a section in this email. And this email was set to deliver no more than once per day. So although the alert was triggered every hour, we get these broken down in a 24-hour digest view, basically. So that way you don't get too many emails, and you can give the control right back to the user on how they want to see their information. A couple other pieces here of note. This also shows that what I've been setting up here is that in this account, let me know when any service goes over the threshold that's been set. So right from this email, I can see that this particular service number has met the threshold in this hour time period. And this information makes it very easy to go back into the reporting application and drill in to see more information about that particular, all the detail records that have created this trigger. So that's very powerful as well. And let me just go back. So that's kind of an overview of the new alert functionality, and I'm very happy that we were able to get all of these product requests into one release. The other thing I just wanted to mention about alerts, and this is kind of the last thing I want to mention here, is that when you create an alert, there are a lot of conditions and criteria that you set up to make that alert function. And diagnosing alerts can be tricky because the data is coming in. It's not like you can see the results immediately. So when you're tweaking all the criteria that you saw, if something goes haywire and you're getting too many emails or something's happening that doesn't seem quite right, you can now suspend an alert. And by suspending that alert, what it lets you do is take that alert offline while you're evaluating the criteria. People don't get spammed. You can, in your own time and leisure, make sure that criteria is correct, change the criteria, and unsuspend the alert when you're done. So this is very, very useful. Before, if something went haywire, you had to stop everything, delete the alert, and then you didn't even know what your criteria was to fix. So we're very excited to put this in here, and it provides kind of a more well-rounded solution in terms of the UA functionality. And I just wanted to say lastly on the way this whole system works, you know, the goal has been really around a proactive system that does the work for you. You set up these alerts in the background. It does this work for you. It does constant evaluations. You don't have to log in. You can set this thing on autopilot. You can be emailed or text when something comes up, and then you can, at your own leisure, go to the reporting application and view that data if you'd like to see that there. So that's kind of it for my part of the demo, and I think we're going to have some time for questions that we can delve into as well.
So Greg, real quick before we hop into the questions, I just wanted to point out a few examples of how Usage Analyst is being used today by some carriers. So the first one, you know, providing an integrated experience. I think Greg just did a great job of kind of showing that throughout the demo. But we actually had an existing client who had the Globus invoicing solution and also had a standalone portal for their business wireless usage. And after kind of analyzing that, mainly driven because they had fairly low uptake, they determined it was, number one, there was some lacking functionality, and then also just not a ton of awareness on the customer side. So we actually brought those data feeds into our solution, made it an integrated experience, and not only did the uptake of the usage component increase, but it also drove some uptake on the invoicing side as well. So from some feedback from the end users, you know, it was really just around, it's way easier to have everything in one place and also keeping it in context. And obviously from the carrier perspective, having that one portal to manage versus the multiple was a huge benefit for them as well. Another one I wanted to just point out was a carrier that actually has coupled this with their toll-free service offering. So obviously that has become kind of a, a commodity product, very similar product features to what their competitors had in place. So they actually marketed this as an offering, and a lot of their messaging is based around the insights that you get from using this product with that usage piece combined with it versus, this is our toll-free product. So again, a good way of kind of, redefining a product based on some of the usage data that they can get from that as well. And then lastly, just one tied to the compliance piece. I think, again, this is a pretty common scenario that we hear of. But there's actually a carrier, they had actually gotten direct feedback from some of their larger enterprises that they were struggling to be able to track and then obviously enforce some of the compliance, again, around a mobile perspective. Basically without, the ability to be able to do that in an efficient way, it was kind of causing the enterprises to roll out, kind of company-wide super strict policies that didn't allow for certain service usage or service types, a lot of things around the data. So actually they rolled this out and they actually started it with some of the larger enterprises first and helped them to kind of, again, redefine their compliance policies based on kind of the flexibility that Greg just showed. So being able to, track at the department level or now even down to a specific user. So again, it really added the value from the carrier perspective because now, there's not the limitations based on some of those services. So obviously that can have a positive impact on revenues. And from a customer satisfaction perspective, now their employees are able to use, the wide range of services and they have those compliance pieces in place to be able to monitor and minimize the risk. So another good example of kind of how this is being used. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Brian, who I think is going to run some of the questions that have come through.
Yes, and thank you, Carrie and Greg, much appreciated. We do have 3 questions posed by the attendees, and we'll try and get to all the questions today, but if there's any that we can't get to in this webinar, we'll answer each and every one, I promise, with you offline. The first question, and I'll let you guys figure out who wants to take these on. The first question is, how frequently do you post usage data and what's common?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say by and large, most of our customers provide data to us on a daily basis. The system itself can intake data as frequently as 10 to 20 minutes and provide that to the customer on an hourly basis. The problem generally is that the carrier cannot get that data to us in that short of a time period. So we can support 10 to 20 minute cycles of loads, but by and large, it's a daily basis. And the nice thing about our application is it's super configurable. So the options around hourly and any sort of period of time to be less than the data load can be removed to remove confusion.
Okay. One more question, 2 more. How do you minimize confusion between unbilled activity and billed activity as they duplicate the same events?
Yeah, that's a very good question. The first thing we did was to make sure that the billed and unbilled parts of the reports were in separate, very clearly separated tabs. So when carriers came to us about combining the unbilled data into the reporting solution, one of the first ideas was to just make the unbilled report data a different report type. So just grouped together in the same list. And we found that when we kind of tested that with people, that although that was the quickest way to do it, it really didn't, that didn't provide the separation people wanted to see, which was one tab for billed and one tab for unbilled. So that's the first piece. And then the second piece is that the application supports, generally we have 12 to 18 months worth of statement data. Sometimes we have 3 to 18 months of the billed usage data. but the unbilled data, generally speaking, is purged on a monthly basis, and we can work with the carrier on when that's done. But the ideal situation we work with carriers is to purge the unbilled as soon as the billed data is available, so that there's no confusion looking back and forth. And that can be extremely confusing if the unbilled data has preliminary ratings in it, because then you'd be looking at two sets of ratings. So with that, I think we've gotten a pretty good separation, and it's very parallel to what I've experienced in the consumer world of cell billing, mobile billing.
Great. I've got a question in two parts for you. Is there a limit to how many alerts can be set up? And can you have multiple users and roles with different alerts?
I'll take that one, Greg. So the short answer is no. There's not a limit of how many alerts. And the great thing is the application is actually a multi-user application. So it's not necessarily that every user would see the same alerts. They can actually go in and build alerts that are specific, again, to their roles or specific things that they want to track. The other great thing is similar to, if you're familiar with the invoicing application, we have integrated hierarchy structures that allow customers to actually build hierarchies and assign accounts and services out to those hierarchies. So for example, a department hierarchy that would have, marketing and sales, and then they would assign the sales director to that hierarchy. And when they log in, they would only see the accounts that are associated with that specific node within the hierarchy. That same thing can actually be applied on the usage side as well. So they can actually, again, just have exposure to those accounts and be able to build alerts aligned to those specific accounts and services. So it follows a fairly similar workflow as to what's on the invoicing side.
Yeah, that was a great answer, Carrie. I was going to just add to that. Yeah, access rights are extremely important in the Globus application, because we know people in extremely large corporations, cannot have access to other departments. That's just, that can't happen. So that's one of the great things about the Globus application. It allows that through the use of the hierarchies. And we also support a backend API where the carrier can provide kind of a whitelist per user that would tell us what accounts that user can create. And then the alert functionality, as Carrie said, would tie into that such that you would never be able to see results from any account you don't have access to.
Great. So one last question, and then we will take all the other questions offline. Your examples were all with usage and activity. What if I want to set an alert for specific criteria regarding bills or bill data?
Yeah, that is a common question we've got. And I did want to, can I take control back and kind of show that one off real quick?
Sure.
Let's do that just to dive in here. Okay. Yeah, so that is a great question. I just wanted to show this just because it's come up a bunch. I'm going to add an alert. So with most of our customers, they have their reporting fields or reporting feeds for unbilled activity or circuit data or conference data, accounting data. Most of our customers, in addition to that, have a bill summary feed, and that basically is the invoice information that is reloaded as a report type. And when we reload that bill summary information into this feed, then we can report on it, and we can run alerts on it. We can evaluate that data. So I don't have that in the system, but I do want to show you could, bill, I'm just going to type bill summary here, but basically the bill summary feed would have different calculation columns in here that would be specific to the bill summary. And for a specific line item that you want to track that you know of is a bill line item that can appear every month, you could basically set a criteria here that is always true. So I could set that is greater than 1, And then you're going to have to just use your imagination. This would be like a bill category up here. And I would probably do a current bill cycle. And then what's nice about these filters, I can add conditions. And with any report type, you get all of the fields available in that report type to use in evaluations. So the bill summary feed would have all of the line item type criteria that would come with that bill summary feed. So then I could choose that here, and I could say, you know, long distance charges are greater than $50 here. And I can set quite complicated conditions up around that with a tree of that information so that I could really evaluate all bills coming in against the business rules that I want to use to evaluate those. So that is an important thing just to talk about with alerts. You know, they were targeted originally for activity back in the early days, but you know, they are agnostic in terms of data, and they can be used towards the bill feed, for accounting feeds, any feeds that we have come in the system. And we just set that up as part of the implementation of Usage Analyst and alerts, because different report types can be set up in our system as alertable or not alertable. And we work with the carrier to make sure that the report feeds are set up in that way if they want to be alertable fields.
That's great. Thanks for putting some color behind that question. I appreciate that. Again, if you have any other questions, we are up against time, but we'll answer them offline. We do love questions, and the contact information provided on the last PowerPoint slide will be your best vehicle for getting those answered. We will have this recording on demand for anyone who wants to view or share it after the fact. And I do want to thank Carrie and Greg for their insight and expertise today, and thank you all for attending this Q2 webinar from Globus Research.